Hello guys and welcome to the first part of the torture test for these Dragon's Heart guitar picks. I filmed so much for these torture tests, I think it's better we split them into a few separate videos rather than having one huge, massive torture test. Throughout the course of these videos we're going to pit the Dragon's Heart guitar picks up against a few other popular guitar pick brands and see how they fare. There's also going to be a number of torture tests on offer, including abrasion, impact, chemical, heat, and a whole host of others, so please stay tuned for all the videos on this. So without any further ado, let's get started. Impact testing. We're going to hit the tips of these picks with a hammer and see just how much it takes to damage these things. We're starting off with the Everlast. This is a Tortex style pick, medium thickness. We're going to raise the hammer to a certain height and bring it down, not too hard, but we'll see what happens. The Tortex just obliterates. We'll try the Jazz 3. 1, 2, 3 hits and we start to see the damage on the tip. And after that, the whole pick starts to fold. So the Jazz was resilient to the first few hits, but the plastic started to distort and suffer after that. The 3mm gravity pick I suspect to be very resilient to this test. We're going to clamp it up and hit it. We're seeing a lot of movement in the vise though, so we're losing energy into the pick movement, but despite that, there's several hits directly to the tip, and we see very little damage. The slightest little bit of flattening, but that's still a sharp pick. Almost perfect. The Chicken Picks is a very tough thermoplastic, but brittle, and we're seeing that after just a couple of strikes, even with movement in the vise, we've just flattened and obliterated that tip. It's chipped and sheared away under impact, so very tough, resilient thermoplastic to abrasion, but when it comes to impact, it's just going to shatter. And the Dragon's Heart Pure, I'm going to hit this one a good bit harder than the others. We are seeing a bit of movement in the vise, but that is due to harder hitting. And we're seeing little damage at all to that tip. When we bring out the vise here, there's a slight little bit of turnover where we've deformed the very edge of the plastic, but considering how hard and how many times I hit that, that stood up to a lot more damage than the rest of the picks on this particular test. And here's the aftermath for these picks. 3 are pretty much destroyed and the other 2 are still completely usable, the Gravity and the Dragon's Heart. But how well will these picks fare in our other tests? Acid testing. Now we've all heard the stories about what happens to a tooth if you leave it in a glass of Coca-Cola for a week. It turns out that there's nothing left at the end. So this is a bath of Coca-Cola and white vinegar, and you can see what it's done to these copper coins here, cleaned off all the oxidation from the layer that's dipped and submerged into the acid. I'm going to take this pH paper and dip it in here to prove it's acidic. The pH paper should turn orangey red the more acidic the stuff is, so you can see that they're turning a little bit orange. So it's a weak acid, but this is supposed to represent human sweat. Our sweat is naturally acidic, some people's more than others, so this is supposed to be a good representation of how the picks will be abused over constant use in our sweaty paws. So in goes the Jazz 3 and the Pure Dragon Heart pick, and we're going to leave them in there for a good while and see just how they stand up to that weak acid. It's been over a week now, so we're going to fish out these picks. Here comes out the Jazz 3, and it looks all shiny, but we'll see just how structurally sound it is in a second. And here is the Dragon's Heart Pure. So both of them have survived, they've not dissolved away to nothing, but we'll see what they can do now. The Jazz 3 looks good, but what I'm finding is that it's quite flexible, and I don't remember it being this flexible before I put it in the bath. It bends quite a bit. If I take a brand new Jazz, this one here, and try to bend it, it doesn't flex anywhere near as much as the one that's been in the acid bath. So the conclusion that I'm going to draw from this is that the acid has softened the plastic of the Jazz 3 and made it a bit more flexible. The Dragon's Heart, on the other hand, has stayed completely the same. There's no damage to it at all, and it's as rigid as it ever was. So it seems to be completely impervious to weak acid and therefore won't be damaged by your sweaty hands. Cold testing. Scottish weather is miserably cold quite a lot of the time. Recently it was snowing for quite a good while, so I decided to take the Dragon's Heart out and bury it in the snow on this window ledge and see just how it would do. So weather forecast was that it was going to snow all night, and that's certainly what happened. At several points throughout the night, I decided to film this and just show the snow coming down, not too heavily, but it snowed nonetheless. So we can see that everything's getting whiter, and this window ledge is getting more full of snow. And in the bright sunny morning before the snow started to melt, I rushed out to free the Dragon's Heart pick from its snowy tomb. Now where was it? Somewhere around here? Yes, in that block of ice. Now not only did the Dragon's Heart pick survive entirely the snow and the cold, but I'm sure it came out stronger and more resilient than it was before it went out there. Heat testing. This is my induction hob and hot plate that I use for melting wax when I'm potting pickups. It's sitting at 120 degrees C at the moment, and you'll notice when I start dropping water on it here, the water boils and evaporates very quickly. Something more interesting though happens when you push the temperature higher. The water will ball up and roll off rather than evaporating. This is due to the very underside of the water droplet vaporising instantly with the heat, and then the rest of the bubble rides on top of the pocket of vapour, so the bubble is protected by the vaporising water underneath. This happens when there's a temperature difference of around 200 degrees, so that's the sort of temperatures we're looking at here. So the picks we're going to use here are the Ernie Ball Everlast, the Jazz 3 as well, because we want to know how well that does. I suspect it'll probably melt pretty quickly. Everlast, you can see, is already starting to melt, so it's not going to last particularly long in this test. Also adding in the Gravity, a 3mm Gravity here. It's a bit thicker, so it's going to take a bit more heat, I suspect, but I'm imagining it's going to soften and melt as well. Oh dear, look at that Everlast, not doing particularly well. And of course, the Dragonheart Pure, it's going to slide in there, and we'll see how it copes alongside the rest of them. After about a minute on the hot plate, the Everlast has just melted and stuck to the surface, so I've removed it before it permanently bonds to my hot plate, but that's gone in under a minute. Another half a minute, a minute and a half or so on the plate here, and we can see that the Gravity pick is soft enough to bend in half. Not melting, but soft. The Jazz 3 is doing surprisingly well. There's no melting, there's no softening of the pick, it's just standing up to that heat. Well done, Jazz 3. And the Dragon's Heart, after a couple of minutes, is, as you'd expect, completely normal. No difference, no change, no nothing. This thing is resisting the heat remarkably well. A couple of minutes on, and the Gravity pick is really getting soft. Again, not melting, but just very, very pliable, very, very soft. And I suspect at this point we could probably just cut it in half with a pair of scissors. Yep. Just like butter. So we'll cut another couple of sections off of this, as I didn't quite get that in frame because I'm an idiot. But let's cut this now. And it just cuts so easily. You wouldn't be able to do this with a non-heated Gravity. They are very resilient, very tough. But heated enough, they soften to the point where they can be cut with a knife or a pair of scissors. The Jazz 3's been on the plate for well over 5 minutes, and we're only starting to see a little bit of bubbling on the plastic. I'm very surprised at how well that's done. And the Dragon's Heart, well, no surprise here though, this is intact, completely unchanged by the heat. That's all for part 1 of the Dragon's Heart torture tests. Remember to stick about for part 2 for some of this. For some of this. And some of this. So if you want to make sure you're around for the second part of this torture test, hit that subscribe button and you'll see all the content that I'm bringing out in the future. Also available on all the social media, and you can leave a comment in the comment section below for anything you want to say. But for now, that's all. So keep it loud and see you later, guys.